This is Raquelle Stevens, and I'm Jenny Steinbach with Her Bible. And Raquel has co authored a book called The Sunshine Mind. And we're going to talk a little bit about her journey and about this book and the potential for encouraging people that it has. So, first off, I wanted to ask you, Raquel, a little bit about your upbringing and what your life was like before beginning a relationship with God.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you, Jenny, for having me. And I love all that you all are doing with her Bible. And I think it's so incredible. So, I was born in Chicago, and my parents were, working normal jobs and felt called to go and start a church in England when I was 3 years old, which is where my dad is from. And so I grew up a pastor's kid. And I think anyone else listening that grew up, a pastor's kid, you grow up falling asleep on the church chairs and you have people over at the house all the time. My parents were constantly, pastoring people. And I think it's a great way to grow up, right? Because you're always around different types of people. You grow up with parents that are serving and helping others. And so that's kind of ingrained in you from a young age. And then, you have your own journey with finding your own relationship with God, right? So your parents can tell you one thing, you can hear something in church, but having a personal relationship with God is different than, hearing it and growing up in it. So I always knew what the presence of God was. I grew up in it and I loved and felt the peace of that. But I would say that my personal relationship with God, where I really experienced it in a real way, happened in my teen years. So my family moved back to the States to start another church in Chicago when I was 12 years old. And I would say eighth grade, around, like, sounds so young now, but at the time I felt old, maybe like 13, 14. I started to get into partying a little bit in school and did that for a couple of years and just found it really sort of unfulfilling. Yeah, and that's kind of around that time I found a church in the city of Chicago and experienced the real presence of God and found that more satisfying than anything else that I was doing.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you found the real presence of God there. Could you describe a little more, like, what was your life like during? So, how old were you when you became a Christian?
7 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You know, that 7 years old was when I don't know if you all talk about this, but 7 years old was when I got filled with the Spirit, speaking in tongues. For people that don't, that are listening that maybe don't know what that is, it's a gift of the Spirit and knowing God. And but I actually, my earliest memory where I asked Jesus to come into my heart, I was 4 years old. And my family, we were living in this house that had a little attic, and my room was in the attic. And I got woken up by what I felt was like this bright light. And I went and I got on my knees in the middle of the room and I prayed and I said, Jesus, will you come into my heart? And I told my parents the next morning, and they gave me a Bible that I still have, that I can send you all a picture of, actually. And they gave me this little pink slip, and it said, on this date, I gave my life to the Lord. And yeah, so I was four, actually, 4 years old.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was 18. I grew up in a church environment that was not, you did not feel the presence of the Lord. So when I went away to college, then I met people that I could see Jesus in them, and their lives were authentic and completely different. And they really attracted me to God. And it was through them then and through Crew that I came to Christ.
That's so interesting. So you grew up actually in church, but never really experiencing it for what
Yes.
it's meant.
Yes.
Wow. Doesn't that show you the power also of community? I think about that all the time. Ultimately, our lives are the best examples. So it's like you found community in people who were living lives that were attractive and representing Jesus in a real way.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So you said that you were partying a little in eighth grade. It sounds like you had a very brief time of, turning
Like
away, but
like
uh,
eighth grade to like sophomore year, I would say.
uh-huh.
That was my vibe. Yeah.
hmm And so how did you, can you get a little more specific about how that was unfulfilling and what drew you back?
Yeah, so I think, first I was getting grounded a lot, which was not enjoyable for me. I would go to parties on the weekend, get experiment with drinking, so I was getting drunk. I was, doing all of those types of things that a lot of teenagers get into and, you know, having flings with guys and whatever, just not living up to maybe the best version of myself. And I think you do something enough and you see, oh, well, these flings I'm having with guys, it's not leading to any long-term real relationships that are built off of trust and security and safety, or I'm not feeling well the next day because I've drank too much and I'm making a fool of myself. And I think for me, I was like, that's not the kind of person that I want to be. And I found it unsatisfying. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with, having a drink when you're of age. But at the time, it wasn't right and it wasn't making me the best version of myself. And so my mom, my sweet mom, was like praying for me a lot at the time and found this church in downtown Chicago that she thought, oh, this is kind of a cool church. Like I think Raquel maybe would like it here. And I hit it off with the pastor and his wife, and they kind of became mentors in my life. And I just realized that that was a better life than what I was living. It was filled with people who had purpose and meaning in their life. It was also fun. It was community that was, yeah, ultimately kind of what you were saying about people you met when you were 18, people that were living lives that were attractive, and the life that I was living was not the right path for God's best for my life.
I'm so glad that your mom made that decision,
Yeah.
and helped you in that way. I wanted to ask, how do you describe walking with God, and what's your practice of walking with God?
Yeah, I think it looks different for everybody. For me, it's so much a part of my daily life. So I'm out and about a lot. I have, whether it's a work responsibility or I go to dinners or I'm going to events, my car time is my prayer time. So I'll put on worship music in the car. I'll pray. Walking with God is like, it's just all day, every day. Like it's something I don't even really have to think about anymore. It's so much a part of my life. So if I get a call and it's exciting, good news, I'm like, oh, thank you, God. Like I'm so grateful. Thank you. I get a call that's bad. I'm like, okay, you know what? We're going to get through this. Like, help me, God. Maybe say a little prayer, or even if it's not a prayer, it's just like saying or thinking that and feeling that peace. And my practice is it's driving in the car and listening to worship music and praying, and it's also going on walks. So grateful to live in Southern California where most of the time the weather's nice, so I'll go on a walk around sunset time and put on some worship music in my headphones and just kind of feel that peace that comes every time.
I love that.
But I'm not the kind of person that, I wake up in the morning and immediately I'm writing my journal and taking my 20 minutes of time. I'm a little more unconventional in that I'm like, you know, wherever I'm going, whatever the time is, I go for it.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, the thing I love about that is it fits great with her Bible. I don't know if you've tried listening yet or anything, but that's what we're encouraging people to do. And I got the idea through driving and
You
listening.
did?
Yes.
Hey girl, you need to take a drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you the story real quick, but um I was working on a city project with crew, and so just driving by myself and through heavy traffic, and in Orlando, nothing compared to LA, but I was spending an hour and a half to 2 hours on the road every day. And I didn't want to absorb the anger around me from the other drivers. So I started listening to all sorts of great books on audio, and I heard great men's voices, great women's voices, and then I go to listen to the Bible too, and I noticed a silent space.
Oh,
And there were not women's voices reading God's word. And so I was searching and I found other apps, but it was the same men's voices. And so I was sitting in church a week or so later, and the pastor had just come back from Ethiopia, and he was
Mm.
sharing this story about a woman who was had an orphanage, and she was trusting God to provide for 100 orphans. And I immediately started crying because I've been to Africa. I could picture that, and I admired her faith.
Mm.
And then he asked 2 questions. He said, "How has God gifted you, and what is the world waiting for you to do?" And I felt like the Lord spoke through that and said, "Jenny, you have the background to do an audio Bible in women's voices." Well, I
Oh,
nearly jumped out of my seat because it really scared me, because that felt really big, and I previously had been on a team that had a large team with great funding to do everything they wanted, and now I was by myself just following my passions.
wow.
And so, yeah, so then a friend said to me, "Jenny, why don't you think of this like a pregnancy and let God tell you over some time and some months, what He wants it to be." And so then I felt like the Lord was bringing together all these experiences that I had had, and my passion for women, my love for audio, and I didn't just want this to be women like me. I wanted the ethnicity of our country to be represented and to give many women the opportunity. And I also wanted to express God's heart in the way women would express God's heart. And I wanted people to feel that and feel comfort through listening to the Bible. That was my that's what happened.
Unbelievable. Such an amazing story. And I think, everything you said, that is God's heart, to show everybody, all different ethnicities, and have everyone share their heart, and coming from women too. I think it's so beautiful and powerful.
Mhm. Yes, thank you, and men love it too.
And then yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah, we don't yeah, I mean, when they find it, we don't try to reach them as much because there's
Yeah,
so much for them, but
yeah.
but when they find it, they're like, "Wow."
That's so cool.
Yeah. I'd love to hear some of your heart behind writing The Sunshine Mind.
Yeah. So I don't know what Tanya told you, but the idea came about around, oh my gosh, must have been 2021, and it was still in the thick of the pandemic, and there was just, I mean, there still is in the world, but especially at that time, still so much uncertainty and a lot of anxiety and anxiousness coming from people about what's ahead, about what's happened. And Tanya was working on a dating book that just wasn't really getting picked up. Nothing was happening with it. The woman who did her proposal reached out to her and she said, "I want to do another proposal for you pro bono. I just really believe in you. Do you have any other ideas?" And she was like, "Well, so many people are struggling. My devotional book has helped me so much. I would love to do a devotional book, but I don't feel qualified enough to write scripture." And she's like, "Well, do you have anyone you would want to do it with?" And she's like, "Yeah, I think my friend Raquel would be perfect to do it with." So she reached out to me, and I said yes, of course. And it's so my heart. And so, yeah, that's how it came about. And then, you know how it goes, it takes forever, right? So you have this idea, and then by the time it's actually like, you get the book deal and it's time to write, a lot of time's gone by. And then it takes a lot of reflecting, especially when you are writing devotionals from your own life and personal examples, and you're being vulnerable. So it was a beautiful process. And also, I don't know, it made me kind of emotional in a lot of moments, because I was thinking back over, especially the last like 10 years of my life, about what God's done. And you get reminded of things that were hard, things that were good, and everything in between. And you're like, wow, God has been faithful. Or wow, that was hard, but I got through it. And then being able to share that is amazing. So I loved the process, and I would say that it brought about a range of emotions in my life. Yeah.
Mhm. Wow, awesome. I love hearing that. Yeah, it took 5 years from that time when God spoke to me. Yeah, and we completed the whole Bible and the app and everything. I mean, we had an app in 2020, July of 2020. So the New Testament in July of 2019, and then the app in July of 2020, and then the completed Old Testament, so full Bible in July of 2022.
I think that's important for people to hear because I think we live in a time where everybody kind of wants a quick fix or they want to make things happen immediately. And it's like, well, God's put this in my heart. Like, I want it to happen next week, like, and rarely are there things that can happen like that. Most of life is it's a journey. Our dreams, our hopes, our desires are a journey, and then you get it, and then it's like it's on to the the next thing, or it's growing it. But I think that patience is key, and learning how to be patient. It's the payoff is so worth it.
Yeah, and persevering. One of my pastors said, Jenny, there are other people on this waiting on the other side of this vision, and they don't even know. In fact, this one woman from Atlanta, she told us that this is what she's needed, and she just didn't know it. And she was a victim of trafficking and is in recovery and helping other women. Yeah, so I wanted to ask, what are you hoping that people will experience? And especially if they don't know much about God, what are you hoping people will experience as a result of reading the book?
Yeah, well, so many things. And I've said from the beginning, even though this is a Christian book, this is a book for everybody. And no matter what you believe, if you believe nothing right now at all, I hope that through reading it, you can gain wisdom from the scriptures and from the personal examples and apply them to your life. And I also hope that through people reading it that they develop some sort of spiritual practice in their life. So a lot of the days have challenges or thoughts or things to implement. And what I've found is that when you have a strong spiritual life, you have a strong inner life. And when your inner life is strong, when great things happen to you, when you get the job, when you get the relationship, when you get that thing you've been wanting, it humbles you and it fills you with gratitude. Then when bad things happen, the spirit sustains you and helps you get through it, and everything in between, from the mundane to the okay days, all of it. The spirit literally it fills you. And so my hope is that people reading it develop a stronger inner life.
Awesome. I love that. Oh, one thing I love, I formulated this question in between after I finished with Tanya. So I didn't ask her. But one of the things is that there are so many people struggling and young people leaving the church. And
Mm.
yet both of you are excited about being involved, growing through your church connection. And I wanted to ask you, how would you recommend if people are searching or if they've been feel wounded by the church, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think something, I would say to that, and I've experienced some of those same things. And I think what helps me is understanding that people are people, right? And I think so often people are hurt by a person, and then it's like, well, that's just the church or that's God. And it's like, people are going to hurt, I'm not saying they're going to, but people can have the potential to hurt you in any situation, in a friendship, if you work for a business, if you're at a church, because we live in a broken world, and that is humanity. And so I think accepting your hurts is first and foremost, accepting them, forgiving the person, not accepting that it was okay, but forgiving, and then moving forward and using discernment about what is the right place for me to be. And the truth is, there are so many different types of churches, small, big, different denominations, doing amazing things. And I think you have to find and discern what is right for you. There's nothing that's going to be right for every single person, it's different. But, study the word on your own, seek God's presence on your own, use discernment in finding good community, and understand that people are people. So when someone hurts you, that is not the church. It's very unfortunate when they do that under the name of God and people mess up. It's not okay, but know that it's human. It's not the church and it's not God.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I have. Is there anything else you would like to share?
Well, I think we covered a lot. I think my main thing too is just that people know that they are not alone and that there is so much more good in the world than there is bad. And that's why we called it the sunshine mind, because you can turn on the news and you can go on your Instagram and you can see, oh my gosh, it can get overwhelming. There's so much darkness in the world. It's so bad. But I am such a believer and know that there is way more good than bad. There's way more light than darkness. And, I think when we approach things with that perspective, you start seeing more light in your day to day life. You spread that light to others. And so that's, would be my biggest thing, is that people would know that they are not alone and that there is more light than darkness in the world. And I want to encourage people to find that and live that out.
I love that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so great to meet you,
It was so great
Raquel.
to
And
meet you.
yeah,
I love what you're doing. I think it's so amazing.
well, thank you. There, someone loved the idea and is recording the Bible in Arabic in
What?
in the country of Egypt. So that's
Well,
been,
you gave me chills. That
yeah,
gives me chills. I went, sorry, go ahead and then I'll tell you what I think.
that's been my long-term dream, that really we're doing English as a model for the globe and then hoping that others would do it in their own language. But go ahead. What's your question?
I love, love, love the Middle East. Some of my closest, dearest friends in the world are from the Middle East, from Saudi Arabia, and I had the chance to go with them to Egypt this past year. And I think there is something so special about Egypt, for so many different reasons. But
Yes.
you feel the presence of God. You feel the history. You feel we were on the Nile River, and I just think the more people that you guys can reach, the better. And I just think that's so awesome.
Oh, here's another fun fact that you'll appreciate. So we've been developing this coaching training so that I can coach people and more coaches, to coach people globally. And so a young woman approached us from the UK 2 years ago and asked if we would help her or give her advice so that she could record the Bible in a Cockney women's accent.
What?
Yes.
In Cockney? That
Yes.
is so good. That's so
Yes.
good.
And
Wow.
so she's planning to launch the four gospels for International Women's Day, March 8th.
Yes.
And
That is
so,
amazing. I'm
yeah,
gonna
so
download
I'll
that version.
forward
I'm gonna get the
her.
Cockney version.
Yeah, I'll forward her info to you when she launches. I'll forward that launch to you so that you
Please
can
do.
get the link.
That's epic. That is epic.
Yeah, so we're gonna have links to everybody who contacts us in another language. We're gonna, well, if you want Arabic, here, go here. If you want
Wow.
Cockney, go
Oh,
there.
that is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I can help spread the word and be a part. Let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, too.
Great to talk with you, Raquel.
Talk with you too, Jenny. We'll talk soon.
Okay, have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope.